Maybe it'll work. Okay, so I put the screen up so I could draw this now. If I remember where my magic markers went. Where'd they all go? That's good. Okay, so I have an A statement. All S is P. Label that, that's an A statement, right? I have no S is P. So you could see that this and this are contradictory because this says there's nothing in this section, and this says, well, there is. So these two are contradictory. Or contradictions, right? Same thing this way. This says there's no members in here, and this says yes there is. There's one. So the neat thing about the Venn diagrams is they picture what these statements mean. Right? So you can see this, right? So this is a contradiction here. Should have put it all the way down there. Now, if this is true, so all of these are here, and you do have members there, you'd see that must also be true. Same thing here. If this is true, and there are members, then there must be at least one there. And you can see that if we have both of these, they both could be true. Could be the case that one is false, but it does seem like in English, whenever you're using one of these, you're implying that the other one is true as well. So if I say some McDonald's are good, thinking of Jim Gaffigan talking about McDonald's. He also likes Hot Pockets, but that wasn't in this one. Yeah, he does a really good job with those. Yeah, both, you know, I could say some McDonald's are good, some McDonald's are bad. In fact, my wife has favorites. She has a favorite McDonald's. You can see we eat at McDonald's. In fact, our dogs love chicken nuggets. If we go to McDonald's, we have to get chicken nuggets. By the way, I don't understand why anybody would buy 4. Because you pay like $5 for 4, and then you pay $5 for 10, and $6 for 20. So why on earth would you buy anything less than 20 chicken nuggets?
Because you can't eat that many sometimes.
When you have 3 dogs?
The McChicken's like $1.25.
I don't know how chickens could be so inexpensive.
Because
It's
it's
just
non-chicken.
amazing.
Because they're cheap when they're little.
Did you get that? Did you get that? They're cheap? Cheap. Where are those ducks? Baby ducks. Ducks. Wow. So, what the chapter then covers after this is how you can then use this to look at the converse, obverse, and contrapositive. Is that fun or what? And something else that the book covers, and that's pretty good. And I could get a red one, I suppose. Here is one. We could put a little red X. If you're going to be upset about the little red X in there. Where else does he put it? Over here. Does he put one? Okay. So he puts the little red X in there to make sure that if you're worried about the Boolean problem and the issue of whether or not there are actual members, you put the little red X in there, and that just goes to show that there are members, even in the universal statements, just to be free of the problem. That's all that is. So conversion, obversion, contraposition on the traditional square. You could look at the summary of the relationships. Where these are handy when you're writing, if you're trying to take statements that people have given and write it in such a way that you can make the speech more interesting or something, you could use the converse or the obverse or the contrapositive in order to fill out the speech, make it more interesting. So as you can imagine, just using the standard form make a really boring speech. So, translating ordinary language into this. It sounds funny to think these are the only kinds of statements that can be true or false. That's kind of amazing, especially when we have so many different kinds of statements. Now the thing is, as we'll see, once we add logical operators, we can combine our statements so that we end up with more complex statements that are also going to have truth value by definition, right? But the reason that they do have truth value is because the simple statements that they're combined in, right? So if I add a conjunction to two statements, or a disjunct to two statements, or notice I'm always using two statements. And so what happens when I use logical operators later, as you'll see, is that we end up with more complex statements that have truth value, but their truth value is based on the truth value of the simple statements that you're combining. Right. So this is where we get our truth values from the categorical propositions. Now, I don't know, remember I talked about Chinese language not being able to do this. I don't know how they have true statements. I don't know how Trump and Kim are having a conversation right now. Well, one thing is Kim speaks English, right? As far as I know. Right, his education was where, in Switzerland?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure he speaks English, so they could actually have contracts and everything. I don't know. I don't know if Korean has a way of dealing with this. I think I mentioned there was a book about the Chinese language that argues that they do have truth values in a pragmatic sense, that they can compare statements somehow by showing that one statement is more useful than another one. So it might not be exactly the same we have with a statement being true or false, but it might be similar. I don't know how that would work. Be interesting though. But so if I'm translating a statement that someone gives me, some football coaches are persons of character who always put their players' health first. So is that something you'd hear in everyday life? I don't think so. But somebody actually wrote that, they quoted that. That's Greg Easterbrook. Concussion hazards must be addressed. But how would you break that down so that you could see it's a standard form statement? Right? How about this one? Some alcoholics are convicts. Some convicts are alcoholics. If the one is true, the other one is true. Now consider a second statement. Some political parties are disorganized. What does that mean? Is that a set? They're disorganized. Well, no. What we have to do is say, what? Well, what? Some disorganized things are political parties. Some political parties are disorganized groups. That works better, right? Some disorganized groups are political parties. That works best, I suppose. Right? So you had to translate the original statement and show it more clearly that there are two sets of things. I had the same problem thinking in terms of grammar when I was a kid, and you learned that the subject is a noun and the predicate is the verb and the verb is action, right? You think, well, wait a minute, these are categorical statements. You have two sets of things. How does action get to be thought of as a set of things? The answer is you think of all of the things that are performing that action as the set. So if I'm walking across the room, I think I'm the subject, Bill Jamison, whatever you want to call me, right? But what about the second set that I'm related to? I'm in the set of things that are walking across the room, right? So that's how you have to do it, is think in terms of not just a predicate as an action, but as the things that are performing that action as a set of things. Right? So non-standard verbs. All the protesters at the convention were arrested. How do I fix that? All the protesters at the convention are people who were arrested. So now I have the set of people who were arrested, right? Not the were arrested. What set is that, right? So you fix it. Ordinary language statement, some students would prefer to cheat rather than learn the material. That's totally false. I don't know any students that would do that. Standard form translation, some students are people who would prefer to cheat rather than learn the material. So notice you end up with, so you have students on the one hand, that's the subject, but everything that's on the other side of the copula, the word are, people who would prefer to cheat rather than learn the material, is boring you guys to death, isn't it? Well, let me ask you if you have any other questions. And we can just quit at this point.
Sorry, what page were you on?
So I'm looking at, well, page 222 right now. So it says, it is false that. What happens? So what this whole section is about is translating from everyday English into these kind of traditional categorical statements. Is that as boring as I think it might be? But if you were like analyzing an actual speech or something, that's the first step you're going to have to do, is take it and break it down into the categoricals, the standard form categorical propositions, so you can see what's being uttered. And that, in that process, you might actually end up having to take some statements and make two of them. So if someone talks about and gives you what you figure is an I statement, but it implies an O statement, I might have to write down that their argument consisted of both an I and an O statement, and write them both down to be fair to what that person said. Right? Otherwise, I could end up creating a straw man argument of what they said and weaken it. Right? So that would be part of what your requirement as a interpreter and analyzing their argument would require. Sharks are predators for anything you pick. If it's a shark, then it's a predator. Or all sharks are predators. When we get to the symbolic language, we'll say we'll basically say that this statement here is for anything you pick. If it is S, then it is P. This one will say for anything you pick, if it is S, then it is not the case that it is P. Here, we'll have to use a different quantifier because we have a different number. We'll say backwards EX, say X is S and X is P. And here, we'll have backwards EX, X is S, and it's not the case that X is P. So you can talk that way too, as we'll eventually look at that. And notice that's closer to computer languages. That was started by a group of individuals. Bertrand Russell is one, but there were others, Frege, Gottlob Frege, and others, trying to create a perfect human language. They weren't thinking in terms of creating a language for electronic computers. What they were trying to do was create a language that we could translate everyday speech into, so that the statements would be completely unambiguous. Kind of amazing, though. They really came a long way, because if you think about it, what it eventually became was computer languages. Where you think about how much that computer in front of you is dealing with, and none of it is confusing the computer. There's no ambiguity whatsoever. You do something, the computer knows exactly what that implies.
Until it runs into a logic loop and blue screens itself.
Well, of course, the folks that write the code have learned and have applications that enable them to avoid all that, so that if they're producing the code and they end up with a contradiction or a contra statement, the program will tell them right away, oh, this won't work, and you have to fix it. But in a sense, the goal at the time that they started that language was for humans to be able to be that precise. Because of course you end up with World War I, World War II. There's a lot of reasons why academics who were working on this project were thinking that clarifying the language that we use to communicate will help things, so that people are not going to be confused by what other people say. And of course, to some extent, we're still totally confused about all sorts of things that other people say, but the computers are not. Computers are very clear on that. It's amazing, actually. You can see why eventually computers might end up taking over the world. They'll be disgusted with us.
Skynet.
HAL. HAL 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is coming up on its anniversary of, what, that was 68, so this is the 50th anniversary. I'm still not going to take LSD, though, to watch it.
Not necessary.
Scares the crap out of me. I'm not interested. Even though I have a good friend who thinks, as long as you're with someone who knows what they're doing, no.
As long as you're with someone that's not on LSD.
Not going to try it. Not even peyote. Not interested in that. Except Don Juan. Anybody read the Don Juan books? No. Castaneda. My wife did her thesis on Castaneda, so. But she never took peyote either. So. I know you wonder, well, how on earth did she do her thesis on Castaneda if she didn't use this stuff? Oh well. So non-standard quantifiers. What is a quantifier? We talk about quantity. We're talking all,
All some or none.
all, some, or none. And so what about when people say something that's ambiguous? Not every investment banker is a crook. What does that mean? Not every investment banker is a crook.
It implies that
There are,
some
some
are,
aren't.
some aren't.
Some are and some are not. That's how we would break. So that is one statement that can be uttered in everyday speech, but it implies two statements. So if you were going to find out if that person was speaking the truth, what you've got to do is break it down into an I and a no statement and find an example of someone out there who is a crook and who isn't. And then
And
you
it's
know
also
whether
a
or not.
banker.
Pardon?
And it's also a bank.
And yeah, as a banker.
Small market.
Not every novel about romance is interesting. Same thing, right? Some novels are about romance are interesting, and you would probably have to make that interesting books, I suppose. Be specific. And some novels about romance are interesting books. Some novels about romance are not interesting novels. A few movies at the mall are worth watching. Ooh, which ones? Any? Anybody see Solo yet?
So very good.
Not very good?
Captain Struggle. I loved
I don't get
It was
the
good.
I liked it.
You liked it?
Mm-hmm.
But there's no force. The force doesn't show up.
The very end, a little tiny bit.
A little tiny bit.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna, for those who haven't seen it. I think so.
Okay, conditional statements. Ooh, I put, this is a quiz question. Ordinary language statement, if a person has $10 in her checking account, then she is not rich. Why did I say that? See, look, I wrote here, quiz. What the heck was I thinking? I have no clue. Maybe I was thinking, is that true? You have $10 in your checking? I can't ask students that. Do you have $10? No, I can't ask that.
Depends. What your
Depends.
definition of rich is.
Depends. I know
I don't know,
what
if you had,
depends
if you
are.
had
I've
10
seen them.
American dollars and you went to Venezuela, you'd be pretty rich right now.
Yeah.
We still have some depends left in our house from when Grandpa lived with us.
You had to keep a couple extra just in case it stops buying.
Well, you know, when you have an open bag of depends, it's hard to get rid of them.
No friends with older relatives.
Well, how do you ask them that?
Do you need a box
You
of
know,
Depends?
go to the group on Wednesday. Is any of you use depends? You know,
Are you just waiting to use them yourself?
it's the last time I get invited. Well, yeah, I figure eventually.
You'll have to buy another box. You just
TMI, right?
go. Sorry.
I don't know what the heck I'm thinking here. I'm getting too tired to think, I think. But that's what this is all about. Exclusive propositions. Exclusive propositions are e-statements. But you can get some really confusing things. Only persons with tickets can enter the arena. Only persons with tickets can enter the arena. What is that saying?
All people that have tickets can enter the arena? Or all people that enter the arena have
It
tickets?
doesn't actually say all persons with tickets can enter the arena. It says all those who enter the arena are persons with tickets.
So if a person can enter an arena, they can have a ticket, or they have a ticket.
Fine. Hasta la Vegas. Paka, das wieder. Folks are leaving. She has to pick somebody up. obviously a light enough person, you could pick the person.
There's a lot of muscle on it that you don't.
But so what's happening here is the way people use their statements sometimes can make it very difficult for you to figure out which of the four kinds of statements do you have to translate into. So if a person can enter the arena, then that person has a ticket. So all persons who can enter the arena are persons that have tickets. Is that what you would say?
I said like 3 different things, all with different mixing and matching, so I could have said that.
Well, this one, none but students can see the movie for free. So all the persons who can see the movie for free are students. A phrase we have trouble with, the only. Although the words only and the only seem very much alike, they sometimes require different kinds of translation. Android phones are the only phones imported by her company. So all the phones imported by her company are Android phones. Sometimes you need two different translations to cover all the thoughts that are included. So I'm looking at the next page. No under 21 persons. Well, that's a funny way to say that. No under 21 persons are persons allowed to gamble in Las Vegas, and all non-under 21 persons are persons allowed to gamble in Las Vegas. Or everyone but gamblers sleeps well at night. So we can translate these into no gamblers are people who sleep well at night. And all non-gamblers are people who sleep well at night.
I mean, there are times where non-gamblers can just stay up all night and just not be gambling.
Have you ever been to Vegas?
Yeah.
There are people there running those machines all the time. Every time I've gone to Vegas, though, I've won.
Well, you just quit before you make any distinct losses.
Well, I get the free card that they give me that gives me usually, what, $25? I gamble it until it's down to like $5 and then I cash it out. So I win $5 every time I win.
That's one way to do it.
Yep. Okay, well, we're at chapter 6. So I'll just hang around for questions if you have questions. Otherwise, feel free to leave. Anybody know what happened in Korea? Did we have any results yet? Or had
All I
live?
saw was a picture of Trump shaking Kim's hand, so we'll see what
Shaking or
Shake, not shaking, shaking.
What's happening?
Oh, they're
Stabbing
having
in the hand?
He said he was gonna be able to figure out
National summit.
Yeah.
things within 15 seconds of meeting him, right?
Singapore right now. And he's meeting with other people.
How many of you think that he's going to agree to withdraw all troops from Korea? I'm thinking that's gonna happen. That they're gonna pull all the troops out of Korea, they're going to start a process of
honestly though, like thinking about it,
not uniting the two countries, but completely opening the borders. Probably we're gonna see North Korea gradually become a modern country.
what allies America has, and let's see what allies.
Do I watch College Humor? Is that a show?
They were very
They make videos on wonderful stuff, but.
coming out as international scene very.
You can email me a link.
It was so funny, like, are you, like,
There's something you like.
That's my hope. Anyway. This whole business of having nuclear power that's made at us is just ridiculous.
allies are
I
more
would grown men.
every other
Do
ally.
we have those over there?
Not that I
It's
know
really
of.
fucking grown.
Does North Korea have any allies?
Yeah,
Or
all
enemies?
mature.
Oh, really?
Well,
Yeah, that's kind of
Well,
wrong.
well, it's
Did you get
kind
to
of like a
watch any of
mutually
the Brian
exclusive
Regan?
deal
Did you-
because.
But I mean, in all
Did you
honesty.
send me the link?
I didn't, I can send you the link though.
I've watched a lot of stuff over this last week. There's people sending me a lot of stuff. If you didn't send me a link, I probably didn't.
Okay.
I'll send you a link.
He's rather, I guess he has some words, but they're.
Well, I don't mind seeing that myself. It's just I'm not gonna
Yeah.
wanna show something that,
Is this the next quiz?
this is the quiz for tonight. So it's just, oh, by next week. It's just,
Got a whole
that's
week.
two, that's like,
But I think there's one Blackboard that says it's due, 3 quizzes, that's due on the 18th.
oh, that's the
Those are
test.
the essays. Yeah, and that's.
Those are the
test.
essays.
Oh,
So if you go to test 1, I have 6 questions.
yeah.
One of them is like, you have to make the music for your friend's wedding. One is, I forget, I'm sorry. But, I mean, so pick 3 of those that you think would be fun and send me 300 words for each one. So, I don't know if you remember the first class, I said my most amazing education was the defense languages too. You know, the year I spent learning Russian. And I'm absolutely convinced that immersion in a language is the best way to learn. And this is a language. We're talking, you know, what do we mean by deductive, inductive, valid, invalid, true, false? You know, these are kind of a precising definition, you know, for how you use it in logic. And so, writing 300 words might not sound like much, but at least you're doing something towards learning the vocabulary, right? So, I'm trying to be freundlich, gentle, interesting. There's tons of stuff to learn, but I don't want to be oppressive either. You know? So, 'cause I have a feeling you have a busy life.
Yeah.
How did I know?
I'm so tired.
Have a good night.
Yeah, see you
Be
next
safe.
week.
Be safe driving home. Don't hit moose.
I was just curious on some of those things. I don't have a book. Maybe I'm losing it.
Those
But
tables are on wheels. Sure.
for some of those, so like, if it's not all S is P,
Not
said-
all S is P.
yeah. Like, I forget what the example is.
So, yeah, so if
Something
it's
about
not
romance.
all S, then it's not all S is P, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's not saying no S is P.
No.
It's not all.
But
So
how'd
then,
you infer that
so.
some are?
So, not all S is P. That means there's some S that are P.
Why? It's just saying
Not
that-
all S is P. Well, what's the speaker trying to imply? Because if he is saying no S is P, that's this one, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
It says not all S is P. That makes me think, well, some is.
Why?
Hmm.
Like, I just feel like that's an assumption, because if I'm just saying.
Well, I am making assumptions about what he's trying to say.
Yeah, because otherwise, why would we wear it
What
like
I
that?
could
But-
do, if I had the opportunity, I'd say, what do you mean?
Yeah. But I'm just.
I could ask him to tell me what he means. I'm assuming that I'm in a situation where I have to interpret, and I don't have him or her as a resource to ask, to clarify. So do you mean some S is P and some S is not P? Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, thanks.
I guess, like, strictly speaking, though, they're just saying that not all S's are P's. So that means that, I think, it just seems to me like no S's and P's is included in that.
Ah, so you would have interpreted that as meaning E. Not all that.
As E
That
being,
could-
as
that
E
could
being
be.
possible.
Yeah,
Like,
it could
it's-
be, it
it's
could be,
ambiguous.
it could be.
The other thing was,
Because, you know, not everybody speaks the same way.
yeah,
There are varieties of different English dialects, where people will speak a way and you'll listen to them and you'll think they meant something and you'll find out later that that's not what they meant at all. And of course, it's not like, oh, my interpretation of the language is the correct one and no, everybody's got their own opportunity to use the language the way they feel is correct. You can't impose the King's English or something, you know, like
yeah.
So this is an art form of interpreting what the person is saying. It's not a,
Well, when you're putting it, when you're using English along with it, like, if it was all like this. Like you said, if
what's
that
interesting though
fantastic
is,
language
in
that they
a
came up
sense, and one of the reasons, you know, some, even our faculty here skip the portion that we're doing now
with.
and go straight to this stuff, and then maybe even have the whole course that stuff. From what I understand, those students hate it. They don't see the relevance of it to everyday life. Whereas this way, we're going to cover that, but we're connecting it so that you can see, well, in order to know that this is the correct symbolic expression of whatever the person said, this was the intermediary stage that I had to go to
Mhm.
first. And obviously, I might have both of these.
Yeah,
They said something that was ambiguous,
Yeah.
and I interpreted it as both of these.
well, yeah, that's what I kinda came up with, was it was either E or
Mhm.
O or I and O. But the other one was the free, it's free for students, and does that, it seems like you necessarily would have to have like two separate statements for students and non-students.
Well,
If you're saying only students get in free, then you're saying that all students is P, get in
Wait,
free.
only students get in free doesn't say all students are getting in free. Right, you know, you might have some not going. Maybe that doesn't matter. But only students get in free. So all who get in free are students. That seems to be the normal way you would translate that. But you see, what's interesting here is we're trying to clear up the ambiguity in our everyday speech.
Yeah. Well, not really. I mean, only students get it free, you know what that means, but when you try to put it in terms of this, it's different. Or, you know, try to break
Well,
it down
I think
into
what
exact-
Aristotle would say though is that when you understand what somebody means when they say only students get in free,
Yeah,
you're automatically in your mind, not maybe consciously, but you were doing this process. That's what Aristotle, I think, thinks
oh,
in doing
yeah.
this. So if you're gonna figure this stuff out, what Aristotle says we need to do is break it down to the elements that you know to be true.
That you're doing, but you just don't
Yeah.
recognize it.
Right. And I think there are folks that have difficulty with it and would have difficulty with that language too. You know, where you would say that to someone and the person not be a student and saying, oh, free? Oh, I wanna go. Well, you can't go free because you're not a student. You have to pay. You said, but you said only students or whatever, right? The person's gonna be confused. There are folks that don't do this level of processing. And that might be where they're confused,
Yeah.
so that if they
Plus,
have trouble.
it's all in the wording too, because like you can say all students get in free, or you could say no non-students get in free. Like it all depends on how you say it.
Right, well, all students get in free. Does that tell me anything? Well, I'm not a student. How about faculty? Do they go for free? You say, oh, no, only students get in for free. All who get in for free are students.
Yeah.
Everyone else has to pay.
Yeah. Huh. I yeah.
Cool.
I'm gonna confuse myself.
That's,
The
it
tiny
could be
bit of-
fun, though. I remember Logic being
Yeah.
a really good time. Maybe it's brain damage from 1970. Who remembers? I remember Mr. Raniatsky sitting on the desk with a piece of chalk. He had a motorcycle, bald, an interesting kind of guy. Later on, he ended up driving his motorcycle into the side of a car or something, but he lived, I think. He's dead now, though. But I remember having a ball. It was fascinating, the way it took everyday speech and just crushed the heck out of it. And trying to find such clarity
Yeah.
in what was being expressed. And you realize, wow, everyday speech is very, very confusing. But you can
Well, I
take
think
this process.
it's all in the context and I think. Like everything we say is so, like, there's so much context around it, like, when
Mhm.
students get in free, you know.
Who's the
You gotta be
student?
talking about
Where are we?
an event, yeah.
Jim Gaffigan, he was here in Anchorage recently, I think. But those folks cost like $80 a ticket. We went years ago, we saw Bill Cosby, and it was $80 a piece. That was years ago. I don't know what they cost. Too much for most people.
So like some small town comedy clubs, I remember going to one of those.
That's true, they have a lot of, but you know, if he's traveling to places like these, you just see how many people are in the auditorium he was talking to.
Yeah. Well, that's big time crunch list.
And a lot of them are like that. Eddie Izzard, Bill Cosby was. Can you imagine? The whole show is all totally on your shoulders, just talking to people.
Yeah. Not for me.
Well, good night, be safe, see you next week.
Yeah, cheers. Have a good week.
You too.